have been using my RTX 3090 for the past couple of years, and now I finally have my hands on both an RTX 4090 as well as a 7900 XTX. But out of the two, which am I keeping for my upgrade? What is up, guys, and welcome back to Too Much Tech. And in today's video, we're going to be doing a pretty deep dive into what high-end GPU am I going to be keeping in my primary rig. Now, of course, I do use this pretty heavily. I use it for a ton of video editing, 4K, higher end codecs and things like that, and I use Adobe Premiere, so it is pretty resource intensive. And then I'll also do happen to have a bunch of high-end monitors due to the nature of this kind of job and testing a ton of different products. And I wanted to know which of these GPUs is going to be the best bang for your buck, and also what is the end user experience while using these products. The RTX 3090, I've had it for a couple years. I'm very familiar with it, and I see the benefits and the drawbacks of having the RTX 3090. So I had specific things that I was looking for in the upgrade to my current graphics card. Number one, let's talk about some of the things on the outside of the graphics card before you even get it into your PC. Just know that unless you're getting the Founders Edition of a 4080 or 4090, it's probably going to be a pretty massive AIB card. And quite frankly, the same can be said for the reference design of the 7900 XTX as well. And a little bit later in the video, we'll talk about some of the issues with the reference design of the 7900 XTX and 7900 XT pretty soon as well. Hopefully they can get these things resolved pretty quickly. For the cons, as far as the NVIDIA cards go, mainly just the size, and then the whole 12-pin power connector being a pretty big deal, possibly catching your house on fire. Hopefully by now, NVIDIA has that all figured out. I have been using some third-party cables that give me a lot more of a confident connection compared to the NVIDIA adapter that is included with all of the RTX 40 series cards so far. So I highly recommend that you pick up one for yourself. I will leave a link to the couple that I have in the description below, as well as a link to a power supply that I purchased that also has that connector included. But fortunately, if you are going to go with an RTX 3090 or a 7900 XTX, you won't have to worry about changing out your power supply, and you just have to make sure that it's got enough juice to handle it, because the connectors are your standard ATX connectors. One huge thing that I was hoping that the RTX 40 series as well as the Radeon 7000 series would solve for me is that the biggest issue that I had with my RTX 3090 was not the performance or even the size of the card, but the fact that it outputs so much heat into my room. My room would literally get so hot, it was pretty much unbearable during the summer, and I had to get a couple different AC units and things like that. And unfortunately, I can't use an AC unit anymore for a reason I'm not going to talk about. But basically, other than having this super loud fan more or less inside of my room, the RTX 3090 just heated up your room so much, and unless it was wintertime where you lived and cold, it really made it hard to use and hard to want to keep in the long run. So I just want to let you guys know, if you happen to purchase an RTX 3090 or really any of the 30 series cards, they do put out a lot of heat into your room as far as your ambient temperature is concerned. So just expect that. The RTX 40 series, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, it's been pretty frosty. I've had a couple different 4090s and I had the same result, and I also have a 4080 and it does not heat up my room while I'm gaming. Maybe a minor amount. The RTX 3090 was literally making your boy sweat. It was not a good situation, and it's not because I was trying extra hard in game either. And the 7900 XTX is also pretty good at dealing with that heat. I was assuming it was gonna be very similar to the RTX 3090, and I'm glad that that is not the case. Now let's get into the stuff that we all actually care about, and that is going to be the benchmarks. So I'm going to go ahead and roll the benchmarks, and we'll talk about the performance after. So by our example from Forza Horizon 5, in most AAA titles that have ray tracing on ultra settings, the RTX 4090 for the most part is going to come out on top, a pretty good margin ahead of the other current GPUs. The 4090 is a solid bit faster than the RTX 3090 in 1440p, so you will notice a massive difference if you are upgrading from a 3090 to a 4090 as well. Now, as far as the 7900 XTX is concerned, we can see that in esports games like Overwatch 2 and Fortnite, it is a top performer in those games at ultra settings and in 1440p resolution. So keep that in mind. If you are looking to play more esports games, it may be a good idea to consider your wallet and the performance of the 7900 XTX. I do think that for $1,000 for the reference card, it is a pretty good deal as far as the performance is concerned. And even in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the 7900 XTX matches and even a little bit so exceeds the performance of the RTX 4090 on ultra settings. Now, I don't know if you guys are aware, but Fortnite looks totally different when you max out the settings nowadays, and the RTX 4090 does take a little bit of a lead over the 7900 XTX, but not quite enough, in my opinion, to justify spending $600 to $800 more for the graphics card. So when you eliminate the GPU bottleneck and you turn down the graphics settings and stop playing on ultra settings just to see how high you can get the number with settings that realistically you're probably not going to play with, you honestly don't have to worry about all three of these graphics cards maxing out the monitor that you probably have depending on the game that you're playing. Quite honestly, I really only recommend getting the 7900 XTX if you do play a lot of Call of Duty, because it is going to outperform the RTX 4090 quite a bit, and for the price that it is a very good deal in comparison to the 4090 if that is the only game that you plan on playing, or maybe something else like Fortnite and not playing with ray tracing on. Now let's talk about what separates the RTX 4090 and other 40 series GPUs and the 7900 XTX from the older GPUs like the RTX 3090 and other 3000 series GPUs. I'm not going to speak on older Radeon GPUs because I have not had any of them, but I will tell you that if you are a streamer or aspiring to be a content creator or streamer and you use OBS to record and live stream your games, you know when you click on start stream or start recording and then you go back to playing your game, how you feel that little bit of input lag and you just can't get rid of it, even if you get an Elgato and you clone your display and all that good stuff. Well, for some reason on the newer graphics cards, the 7000 series as well as the 40,000 series, you no longer have that input delay when you hit start recording or start streaming on OBS when you're playing games. So now, without having to worry about upgrading your processor and all the other things in your PC and doing a super expensive upgrade like I did, you can now stream on one PC very easily without having a massive loss in performance. And before, you would have the FPS hit, and that really was not the biggest deal, but my issue with single PC streaming was always the fact that as soon as I hit start streaming or start recording, that bit of input lag was just so annoying to play with. And then as soon as you end your stream, it feels totally different having that native performance, but now you get native performance while streaming and recording. More than likely, it has to do with the dual encoders that these graphics cards are now coming with, and it's doing a very good job at giving you higher quality streams. And pretty soon we're going to be able to start streaming and recording in AV1. Technically, you can start recording in AV1, but on Windows right now, there's not a ton of things to play back and edit AV1 except for, I believe, DaVinci Resolve. But Premiere Pro at the moment, I don't think it supports AV1 right now, unfortunately, so I'm not really able to take advantage of those smaller file sizes and higher quality, but I am really excited that pretty soon I will be able to. Now, using my RTX 3090 as a benchmark for Adobe Premiere Pro rendering, the 3090 is taking about 5 minutes and 22 seconds to render a 5-minute 4K 60 H.265 render, and basically that is pretty good, of course, especially having a 7950X with 32 gigabytes of RAM and throwing a couple of effects on the timeline. When I upgrade to the 7900 XTX, it got about 12% faster at 4 minutes and 45 seconds, and then we got a much larger upgrade from the RTX 4090 being about 40% faster at 3 minutes and 35 seconds. So if you are a video editor, I would highly suggest looking at a newer 4000 series card to see a massive increase in your time freed up if you are waiting on rendering quite a bit. But quite honestly, I don't really care too much about rendering the videos because I don't do it full time at the moment. So it's not super important for me to see the final product as soon as possible. And quite frankly, rendering a 5-minute 4K 60 H.265 render in almost real time with the RTX 3090 is pretty good, and you should probably get up and take a break and go get a snack or some water or something after you finish such a long project, and then come back and view your final product. So as far as the performance in the timeline, your actual editing experience between the three, there is some minute differences between the 3090 and the other two cards. So I wouldn't necessarily say that that would be a sole reason why I would upgrade my graphics card purely for the in-house Premiere Pro editing experience. DaVinci Resolve might be a different story. I don't use it personally, but as far as Premiere Pro is concerned, upgrading from a 3090 to a 4090 or even a 7900 XTX is not going to be a big enough upgrade to warrant spending that much more money on a new graphics card. Now, I did have a couple of weird issues with the 7900 XTX. And again, I did say that this is my first AMD card. And even after having clean installations of the new AMD drivers, obviously not having the NVIDIA drivers installed as well to make sure that nothing is conflicting, sometimes it just seemed like my computer just would start stuttering and being really slow out of nowhere. And this is even before gaming in Windows. That was the weird part, is that I would just be using my computer normally and randomly I would start getting stutters just on the desktop. And quite frankly, that was really annoying. I wasn't really happy about that performance at all. And there wasn't really a fix that a driver update could do or Windows updates or whatever, because I checked all of that stuff. It was just really annoying to have to deal with. And also, while I was playing Fortnite, this happened multiple times while I was benchmarking. Sometimes I would just get random dips down to 1 and 2 FPS as far as the 1% lows are concerned. And that amount of stuttering introduced in the game does not make the card seem reliable, especially if I'm wanting to be a professional player or whatever the case is. But even if you're not a pro player, if you're just here on the weekends just to have fun and play some games, that's not a good experience. So with that being said, I know that I do have the reference card of the 7900 XTX, and I've been hearing that there are a lot of issues with the reference card 7900 XTX. That card is getting RMA to be replaced. It's not my personal card. I had a friend let me borrow that card and just benchmark it. So obviously I brought it to their attention, said, hey, this is very irregular performance as far as the stuttering goes in the in-game and also the stuttering in Windows. So they are getting that card RMA, but supposedly that's happening with a lot of people's reference design cards and not on the third-party AIB cards. So currently, at this moment, it's very hard for me to want to recommend the 7900 XTX, especially since it is a reasonably sized card that can fit in a lot of ITX builds. At the moment, it just doesn't seem to be reliable enough in my opinion. So I really can't recommend it. And I would personally rather spend a couple $100 more and get an RTX 4080 for very similar performance for just a little bit more money. I won't be getting 4090 performance in, Call of Duty and Fortnite and Overwatch and blah, blah, blah. But if the graphics card is going to be a lot more reliable and I'm not going to notice insane stuttering like that, I'm perfectly fine with missing out on the extra higher number at the corner of my screen that I shouldn't be staring at if I'm supposed to be immersed in the game. When you're getting over 200 FPS, it's probably not going to be the frames per second that costs you life or death in a game. That's really going to boil down to your skill. So if you have any high-end GPU, you're pretty much going to be good to go and all set. But at this point, I would highly recommend that you look at some of the AIB models for the 7900 XTX. And with that being said, that's going to push the price range of the 7900 XTX up to probably around the price level and also size level of the RTX 4080s that are available right now. Now, I didn't include the 4080s in these benchmarks because I have it in another PC. I would rather pay for the more reliable graphics card, and if the reference design of the 7900 XTX at a reasonable size is not working correctly, I don't think that I would prefer to have one of those in my system and also compromise on the performance as far as editing and rendering and things like that in comparison to the NVIDIA cards. Right now, the 7900 XTX, as long as you get a non-reference design, is a pretty good performer, and I do recommend getting one as long as you're willing with working out a couple of bugs and kinks here and there. But if you want the most reliable experience, you're probably gonna have to go with the NVIDIA cards and shell out just a little bit more money. But in the long run, it's gonna be worth it. You know what, before I end this video, I will let you guys know. So my original 4090 that I RMA'd to MSI, I sent back the entire retail packaging and everything that was included with my graphics card, including my 12-pin power connector. I sent everything back because I wanted them to test it with the exact same things that I was using other than my entire system. So sent everything back. MSI, they went through the RMA process and they didn't send me back the retail box. I was really pissed off about that, but that's besides the point. The point is they sent me back the GPU, and apparently the GPU was fine the entire time, and what was actually broken was the 12-pin power connector. And guess what? They sent me back the exact same defective 12-pin power connector. So I sent them everything. They took my box and all the documentation, all the cool stuff, you know, because we're enthusiasts. We like to keep all that stuff, and it's my fault. I take complete ownership of not completely reading the email. That was my fault. But the fact that I sent everything to them to test as is, and they sent me back the same defective power connector and did not test it, I won't be buying anything from MSI. Just letting you guys know that ahead of time, so just keep that in mind. That is what you heard from your boy Kyle, Too Much Tech. But anyways, I digress. I will have these graphics cards linked in the description below as far as brands that I would recommend, just anything that is not MSI or a reference design of the 7900 XTX for your information for the best experience. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video. If you have any other comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Try to make this video as clear, as concise as possible without being too overloading on information. But if I missed something, feel free to let me know and give me a shout.